Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Ciara from Ciara T Designs, and today I have the second video in my Spooktember series, so let's jump right in. So I'm going to start by cutting down my cardstock. As per usual, I do like the layers. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I'm going to add 2 layers here. I have a black mat and I have a watercolor piece of cardstock that you see me trimming down here. So the watercolor cardstock is going to be 1/4 inch smaller than my A2 size base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then the black mat is going to be about 1/8 inch smaller than the A2 base, so that you get a really nice thin border all around. That's just kind of my preferred measurement. There's no right or wrong way for this. You honestly can do it however you like. But here you can see that I just love that kind of thin border all the way around. And that kind of just frames what I'm working on. And I love that look. So that is what I aim for. So as you saw from the opening images there, we are creating kind of this spooky-ish card. I don't tend towards cutesy for Halloween, so I do kind of tend towards more, not creepy necessarily, but more spooky-ish, and that's kind of what we're aiming for today. So I took the watercolor panel and I brought in 2 colors of Oxide ink in pumice stone and old paper, and I felt like this just kind of gave me a really cool aged look, which is what I was kind of going for. Because I want to create layers, not blends, I am going to heat set between each layer. You're not going to see that necessarily because I won't show it to you on every step, but keep in mind I am heat setting between each layer of this. And I'm going to go in with more color. I think I went in and did 3 or 4 layers of color until I was really happy with how it looked in the background. And I do hit, as I said, heat set between each layer. Now, of course, you could bring in any colors for this. I just really wanted a more aged look because my background is all going to be 1 layer. I did really try to have the skull look like it's a separate piece, but he is 1 layer on the card, and you'll kind of see that as we get going in. Hopefully he looks like he kind of pops off of the card, but I don't know. I was trying a whole bunch of different fun techniques for this. This is a kind of a very mixed media card, and I had a lot of fun with it. But you do see me put some some ink down on that piece of the white that comes on the black glass mat. I think it's a media mat, and I'm only doing that because that is the easiest way to get droplets when you do ink smushing type techniques. And I love that look. You could, of course, bring in sprays if you wanted to work with those instead, but I really wanted a different look because the first card I did was sprays. So I am trying to kind of bring in different mediums that we can kind of work through so you guys can see different techniques and how I kind of make these cards. But I did smush it down onto the media mat piece, and then I run my fingers through it because I don't want squares of color. And then I do kind of pounce my cardstock into the color, so I create kind of splattery bits. I know that's not a great way to explain it. Hopefully that kind of makes sense to you guys. Of course, if you ever have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I do my best to always answer the questions as quickly as I can so that, nobody's waiting to find out an answer to something. So if you ever have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments. So now we're going to get into stamping the skull. So the skull came from the Rest in Peace stamp set. This is a stamp set that came out, I want to say, if not at last year's Halloween release, it was the year before. So it's either 1 or 2 years old now. But of course, Stampers Anonymous doesn't retire their stamps. They're always available. I will do my best to always link and list everything that I'm using in the description below. But if you ever have any questions, again, please leave them in the comments. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have. It does sometimes take me a minute, but I do always try to respond to them fairly quickly. I am going to stamp this down 3 times. Because the cardstock that I used is a cold press cardstock, it's cold press watercolor cardstock. It is fairly textured, so I was struggling to get the detail that I wanted out of the stamp. So you saw me stamp it a few times, and then I decided to go ahead and clear emboss it because I thought that would just give it even more detail. And I love that look. And I did intentionally stamp off of the card. I wanted the skull to be kind of off the card panel a little bit, just because I thought that would look really neat in the composition. But of course, I mean, if you want the whole skull, just stamp the whole skull on the card. That works too. This is just because I liked the idea of the composition this way. It does end up giving me less room for the moths that I'm going to bring in later, but I made it work, and it worked out pretty well. I'm really happy with how these cards turned out. You guys will have to let me know your thoughts because, as always, I definitely want to know what you think. But I'm pretty excited about them. I used a lot of different techniques for these, and I love how they came together. So you guys will have to give me your thoughts because I always want to hear what you're thinking about on what I create. But you saw me stamp a mask there as well because I am going to mask the skull. You can see that the skull is on the background, right? And I wanted it to feel like maybe I cut it out and added it on top without actually doing that. Don't ask me why. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't know, I wanted to play with different techniques, I guess, and this is just how I saw the card in my head, so it's kind of what I went for. So I stamped out the skull on some masking paper, and then I am going to fussy cut it because, of course, I need it to be perfectly line-up-able with the skulls on the card. I'm going to bring in some paste, and I'm also going to add a shadow to the skull a little later. And for that, I really wanted this mask because I didn't want anything to go over the skull itself. So I did create a mask. If you were not into fussy cutting, if this was not your thing, you could have done the skull on a separate piece of cardstock, but you'd still have to cut it out. So I think making the skulls slightly easier, or alternatively, don't worry about, the paste going over top of the skull. That's definitely an option as well. This is what I was going for, so that's kind of what I did. So I'm going to bring in the skull. I'm going to set it on top of the one that I have on my background panel, and I'm going to bring in a stencil. This is the script layering stencil from Tim Holtz, and I'm also going to bring in, I believe it's the grave paste. I'm not sure if you can still get this. This came in a little set a year or two, I want to say 2 years ago. And it's this great gray color. It's really pretty with like a Halloween themed item. You could, of course, bring in Crypt instead. Because I think when this came out, Crypt and Grave came out in little ones together. So I actually have both, but I really loved the gray color of this because it was subtle, but still there. So it's one of those things where use what you have. The black paste would look great. The Grave paste would look great. The Crypt paste would look great. Whichever one you want to use. There's no right or wrong here. And then I'm going to create the moths that are going to go on top of the skull. So this is the stamp set Moth Study. It also, I believe, came out the same year as the skulls. And if I recall, I honestly want to say it was 2 years ago. I want to say that someone on the design team did a moth crown on this skull. I want to say it was about 2 years ago. And that idea has kind of stuck in my head for a long time, and I've really wanted to kind of create something like that. I didn't do a crown, as you guys saw. I kind of just do where all the moths are kind of just on top of the skull. But the inspiration came from that design team member on Tim Holtz. I don't remember who did it because it was I honestly think it was 2 years ago. So, but that is where this original inspiration came from. So I am going to stamp the moths, and I haven't prepped these stamps. I haven't used them before. So I was stamping them in Versamark and then stamping them off on a separate sheet of paper just to prep the stamp. And then I would stamp it in the ink color that I actually wanted the moth to be. And then I would add the distress glaze on top of that. So I am going in my favorite rainbow colors. So I am going to use picked raspberry, carved pumpkin, squeezed lemonade, twisted citron, salty ocean, and wilted violet. And I stamped out 2 of the moths because obviously I'm making 2 cards. And then I'm going to heat set them with the glaze. And then for the glaze, they're all the same, except instead of carved pumpkin, I have wild honey, because carved pumpkin I don't believe is offered in the glazes. If it is, I don't own it, and if it is, it wasn't available when I went to buy them. But that was kind of what I'm doing here. It's just because I wanted them to be shiny, and you'll see when we stamp them or when we cut them out and I put them on the skull that the embossing glazes are really cool. You can see through them. So that is why I opted to go with the Oxide ink as well. You could have stamped them with Versamark, and then stamped with the glaze, but they would have been incredibly subtle because they are translucent, not opaque. So because of that, you lose some of the detailing that way. So that is totally an option if you don't want these moths to be as vibrant as I have them. But you guys know rainbows are like my favorite color palette. I love bright, vibrant colors. They make me smile. They're just one of my favorite things. So for me, I wanted there to be very, very bright moths on top of the skull's head, but completely up to you. If you want them to be a little more subtle, don't use the Oxide first. Just stamp with Versamark or whatever sticky ink you use, and then use the glazes, and they will be a lot more subtle than they are here because they are transparent. So keep that in mind if you're going to use the glazes. Also, I don't try for a perfect stamping when I use my glazes, or sorry, it's the coverage, I guess, of the glaze. Like, you know, when you add embossing powder to something and you're going for great coverage because you're attempting to emboss the whole image, like the skulls. But with the moths, I don't need it to be perfect. I mean, some of them have a little bit of glaze and they're not as shiny as the others, but I love that look. I think it really adds something to this type of card because it is a very mixed media, a very whimsical card that you don't need it as much for them to be perfect. Now, I don't. Maybe you prefer that. Completely up to you. I don't need that. I love imperfections. They kind of just make a card even more homemade and, you know, beautiful. So completely up to you what look you're going for, but that is what I aimed for. And then here is where I'm trying to make the skull stand out a little bit more from the background. So I brought in Hickory Smoke Distress ink and I just added a touch of it around the skull. So I used the mask again, and this just kind of looks like there's a skull, like there's a shadow around my skull. So it helps it pop against the background a little bit more. It's very, very subtle. It's actually a little bit hard to see on video, but I love the way it looks. It just gives it that little bit of something extra and differentiates the skull from the background. And then I went in and I cut out all, I did 6, I think it was 6 because I do two sets. I used the Baltic Goth Portraits die set and I cut out the word boo. You could have used the other words. They didn't fit. Boo was small enough that it fit nicely. Otherwise, I probably would have used, I think fright is in there or something. But it didn't fit, so I went with boo. I cut it twice out of the same black cardstock from the mat, and then once out of a glitter black cardstock that's going to go on the top. And I'm just popping out the extra pieces that are sitting inside the letters. And I just thought this was kind of a fun sentiment. It's not... I mean, generally I associate boo to like ghosts, but I think it's still appropriate for a Halloween themed card. And I also went in with my reverse tweezers and used the tweezers to help prop up the wings on the butterfly, leaving myself a flat area to adhere to the skull's head. And I played with different ideas there. You can see like one kind of has just a smattering of moths on the head, and then the other one kind of has them in a more crown-esque shape. I didn't think that the crown would work simply because of where the skull is stamped on my card. Like if I had done the skull in the center and given myself a lot more room, it would have worked better to, you know, have the moths go across the head as like a crown or something like that. But I didn't do that. I stamped him off center because I really wanted him to just be slightly off the card, leaving me room to add the texture paste and have that background be kind of standing out. So that's what I was thinking when I did that. So I'm just going to kind of adhere the moths on top of the skull's head as if they were standing on top of it. I don't know if you guys have seen, you know, videos in nature or whatever. You'll see butterflies and they'll all be standing on something and it's almost like they're standing on top of each other. They aren't. They're all standing on the ground or on whatever object they're on. But because of their beautiful wings, it almost looks like they're standing on top of each other. And I love that look. I think it's so, so neat. So that's kind of what I was thinking as I adhered my moths down to the top of my skull here. I just kind of thought like they were all just standing there together and, you know, their wings were kind of overlapping and it just kind of looked really neat. So that is what I went for. I love this card. I am so excited with how it came out. It's different than what I normally do. Not the rainbow part so much, but the background is a lot different. I don't think I've ever used old paper, and I had a blast with it here. So it was a really fun experiment to use colors that I normally don't reach for, you know, so I've kind of been treating this as a bit of an experiment as well, you know, to try to take my creativity even further than I normally would and try techniques that I normally would use, but in a very different way. So I had a blast with this card. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I would love to know your thoughts. Please let me know what you think of this card because it is a bit different than what I normally do. Not terribly, because rainbow is, you know, my jam, but I'm really excited with how they came out. So I'm hoping you guys really enjoyed it too. Of course, I did want to add just a touch of dimension. So I did bring in my Big Mama foam tape, and I'm just going to add that behind the panel before I adhere it down to the card base. And then that's pretty much this whole card. I went back and forth on adding gems, but I didn't really want to take away from what I have going on right now. Like, I think that the subtle texture in the background and the different colors, I honestly wish you guys could see these cards in person, because some of it does get a little lost with the camera. Like, because the the grave paste is a fairly similar color to pumice stone. Like, it kind of has that same tone. You don't see it super easily in the background, but it is there, and it is super, super pretty. So I do wish that you guys could see that a little bit easier, but that's okay. Hopefully you can see it and it comes across in the video and you love it as much as I do. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this, and I do have plans for other videos coming up with a lot of stuff. I did make a mistake. Today was supposed to be a live stream, but I got confused and I'm not available for live stream today. So you guys get this video, and then I will do a live stream for the next 2 Thursdays in a row. So the next 2 Thursdays at 3 p.m. PST, I will be doing a live stream. So if that's something that interests you, please come hang out with me. I'm not totally sure what we're going to do. Some kind of really cool card. That's my plan anyway. So yeah, if you are free, come stop by and visit with me next week at 3 p.m. But that is the card I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll leave me a like, leave me a comment, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.